Some time ago, we promised you a review of the Acurus Muse Audio Processor. Now, this has taken us some time for good reason. Okay, so we unboxed the Muse, you saw us do that, and we promised to do a quick review, but that's not what happened. We found that we needed to tackle this in two parts. So first the Muse, and then the ASPEQT AutoCal system. First part, the Muse processor itself. Well, we installed it into room 2 and we had a quick listen with it uncalibrated. Now, I should explain this because we kind of get away with that a little bit. We've got a rather special, well-calibrated set of subwoofers that are already configured to the room, and this is done on a mini DSP. So really all I had to do was set delays and also the level to fit in with the Muse, which we did. So that worked out well. And as the room's quite well designed, I wasn't too bothered about audio above 200 Hertz, which is in that room roughly the Schroeder frequency, or transition frequency as it's known. So we had a good listen, and the verdict is I really liked it. I was very impressed. Nice, clean, balanced audio with lots of detail. Very nice to listen to. So let's take a look at this in a bit more detail. The Muse is well built. It's sturdy and it's well laid out. It's only 2 units high and it doesn't generate a lot of heat, which is nice. And it weighs about 23 pounds or 10.3 kilos. What is interesting is the Muse does one thing and one thing only. It doesn't try to be all things. It just processes multi-channel audio, and that's it. There are no bells, no whistles, no extra electronics, gizmos, gadgets or features, no sideline processing, no AirPlay, Chromecast, Spotify, and as a point of controversy perhaps, not even or a 3D. I did ask them about this. Their answer was, well, their research had shown that not a lot of people actually use it, and at the end of the day it would add to the cost. Anyway, it just does what it does, which is a reason I suspect that it does produce the nice clean audio. There's not much else in there messing with the audio path. I took a look at the specs and I asked Acurus for a bit more. I didn't really get much, but this doesn't really mean anything. I just wanted to compare some other products. So here, side by side, are the Muse, the AVM70 and the Arcam AV40. It doesn't really reveal much, and to be quite honest, I don't know, a bit like speakers, that you can put too much stock in numbers. I just know that the Muse produced really nice, clean, well-detailed sound. In terms of the hardware, this is the rear of the panel with all of the inputs and outputs. And one of the ways they've kept it clean is the use of these Tetra cables, which allow the expansion up to 16 or 15.1 outputs. This isn't strange. Trinov do this too, and as long as the cables are well made and shielded, I don't see an issue, except maybe you could argue that there is one more connection point in line and perhaps another potential point of failure. But we had no problems with this at all. So on the back we have 2 stereo unbalanced inputs, 2 coax RCA digital and 2 optical inputs. There are 12 XLR outputs on the back of the unit and 4 cab 20 balanced XLR outputs via Tetra cable, which gives you, of course, the 16. There's 1 coax RCA output, 1 optical output, 8 HDMI 2.0B, apparently 2.1 ready, 4K pass-through HDMI inputs, and 2 HDMI outputs. That's 1 HDMI 2.0B, 2.1 ready, and 1 2.0B. There is also an Ethernet port, 2 USB ports that output 5 volts at 2 amps, with an extra 2 USBs, one's a Type A and one's Type C for programming. I don't think we touched those. There's also an aux out serial port, an RS232 port, an IR in, 12 volt in, and 2 12 volt trigger outputs. That covers the lot. Now the control side of things at the front. There's an on switch, of course, which from the first power up takes quite some time, but from then on it goes into a standby mode and it starts up pretty quickly. There's this touchscreen, and that's it. Now, the touchscreen is pretty cool, I must say. Here it is. Acurus like to say it's as easy to use as an iPhone, and I think I'd have to agree with them. Now, maybe I'm old-fashioned and I still like on-screen displays for settings, but we seem to be moving away from that. Muse doesn't have it, and I've noticed that Anthem doesn't either. I'm not a fan of their choice to nix the on-screen display for settings. As a calibrator and a cinema designer, I already have iPads and laptops doing other things. I just don't want to have to open up another window to work on the system. All right, I want to be able to glance up to work on the settings, as opposed to, of course, having to log into yet another URL. Look, that's my preferred way to work. And who wants to go to those extra steps after all? So I just find that, an on-screen display is so easy to work with. And I would ask if they think that every user who's going to buy a product thinks that they're really comfortable with HTML logins. I would probably argue not. It's not complicated, at least not to some people, but for others, maybe it's a hassle. And so for my vote, bring on-screen displays back, for settings at least, or give us an option to turn it on or off. Anyhow, so that aside, the touchscreen on the Muse works really, really well. So let's do a quick tour of that. Okay, so from turn on, it's quite quick. There is, when you first power it up, quite a delay until it gets into standby. From then on, it boots up very, very quickly. And here's a touchscreen. It's loaded and ready to go. So first, our inputs. Obviously, we can easily select from the touchscreen all of the inputs we want. And we can select our modes, whether it's direct, stereo. We can have a night mode, DTS, and other speaker configurations, just as an immediate selection. In here, we have a speaker configurations. This shows us our layout and our speaker selections. So that's very, very easy and straightforward. So bed layer, subs, and overhead. And in here, we have options for delays, levels, polarity, size, crossovers, and things like that. We have a high shelf and low shelf filter and global parametric EQ that can be applied. And then for each and every individual speaker, we have 5 PEQ slots, and we can also generate tones, which is handy. Okay, from there, we can select the outputs again in more detail. So we've got different speaker configurations, night mode, Dolby, DTS, etc. Here's our HDMI configurations, standard or enhanced, HDMI 2.0, and delays. In here, Dolby options, range control, and center spread. And in here, DTS options, of course, dynamic range control available there. Levels, so we can set maximum volume levels. Trigger options. Display options, so brightness and timeout. Firmware version, and allows for a reset. IP address, network information, DHCP or static, and system reset and factory reset. So that pretty much takes you through it. That's as simple as it is. Okay, so in terms of hardware, that's really it. The unit works really well. It's easy to set up and operate. The things I like, and I'll go through them in a kind of list of pros and cons. Pro, great sound quality. Pro, easy config, like really easy configuration. Con, no on-screen display. Pro, it's a low-profile unit. Pro, the unit is focused on the job and not loaded with extras. The con, well, you might have wanted Aura 3D, maybe. Pro, up to 3 independent sub-outs. Con, for me, and this is a bit biased, I'd like to have 4, but hey, as they pointed out to me, come on Andrew, 3's one more than pretty much anything else on the market, other than perhaps Trinov and Storm, which is double the price. Pro, a very accessible PEQ setup for each and every channel. Con, maybe, only 5 PEQs, but that could be enough. I have heard a rumour that maybe more are on their way. Pro, it has its own automated calibration system. The con is, well, you'll have to listen to the next section about that. But also, there's no way apparently to load in REW files, which would have made this a lot of fun for the geeks and the home hobbyists, and I think that's a bit of a bummer. And given that it's got an RS-232 interface, that would be a cool thing for this to be able to do. It would be a real, AV tweaker's delight, I think. Anyway, Pro, they've built in drivers or made available drivers for almost every automation system I can think of. Con, for us, in our room, the Control 4 driver that we use seemed to be a bit laggy. You do volume changes and it would sort of jump up and down and backwards and forwards. I can't compare this with any other system, so it could have been us, but we don't have that problem with others, so I don't know. All right. So who is this unit built for? If you have a multi-channel system, maybe an Atmos room, and you want a sleek, well-built, low-profile audio processor that does its job exceptionally well, then this is for you. But here's the rub. You're going to need to be fairly capable. You're going to need to be a hobbyist or a DIYer and an enthusiast to get the most out of this. You'll either need to know how to measure and create filters and calculate delays for each channel, in which case you will get amazing results, or you'll have to listen to it out of the box, as it is. Well, why is all of this? Again, you need to watch the second part of the video to explain this. Overall, what do I think? I love this unit. But if you are a basic home theatre user and you just want to walk in and buy a product that's not for you, if you're a DIY guru, then yes, it's amazing, and it'll outperform many of the other processors on the market. So that's it. That's the Acurus Muse. Let's get on with part 2, ASPEQT. Okay, I said it took a long time to produce this video, and this is why. Once we'd installed the unit and we had a listen, then we fired up the ASPEQT Room EQ. Now, there's quite a bit to this rather clever system. You get 4 microphones, and they're of a much higher grade than anything I've seen on an AVR or processor. Arguably, perhaps except for Trinov, maybe, I'm not sure. But these are calibrated reference quality microphones, much like the UMic 1, for example. You also get 1 wireless connection box that the mics connect to, and this needs some power. This is nice. It can be in a different room than the processor, and that's a win. And you don't have to run a cable between the two. That's cool too. It means the door doesn't have to be open, or you don't have to pinch the cable under the door, and the system can talk to the unit, in a separate region. It's done via Wi-Fi, so that makes it really easy. All right. There's an HDMI processor module that connects to the HDMI RS-232 and power supply at the rear of the Muse. The downside of all of this is that the gear that goes into the Muse means you need to pull the Muse out of the rack or the cabinet, and that could be a hassle. I have suggested they would do well to put these ports on the front. Okay, so you get this on-screen display that appears, in our case on our projector, and you can connect to it with a Wi-Fi mouse or even using an app on your phone and tablet, and off you go. Now, if all of this worked well, this would be awesome, except we hit a few snags. But to Acurus' credit, I was connected with the CEO and he took my notes on board, and within 2 weeks, boom, we had new firmware. Unfortunately, we then tested the new firmware, and while it had fixed some of the issues, others had snuck in. I know they're working on this, and in time I think ASPEQT has the chance to be rather amazing. If you could attach it to the front of the unit, easy. Then you would just set up the 4 mics and you pretty much walk away. Your only intervention is to choose a few options at the beginning of the calibration and a room curve, and you literally leave it to do its thing. You don't have to run around and keep moving the mic every few seconds for ages. And I really like that. I also like the fact that, with the 4 mics, they can spatially average, which you do with Arc Genesis and Dirac because you've got the mics in multiple positions, but it's done in one sitting. You could basically set up ASPEQT and go and have a pizza. Come back, it's finished. All right. So I do think that in principle, this is really cool. And as I said, I do think it has the chance to be one of the best on the market, but it's going to take a little bit of work. What we found was its graphing capability, and it produces graphs at the end of the result, look fantastic. But for me, the before and after and the filter results didn't quite make sense. If you look at the filter and then how the end result should be, it didn't quite add up for me. And I think I heard that in the result as well. We also had a few issues where the process hung or dropped out, and also there were some strange values loaded into the Muse that weren't correct. We had, for example, a lot of gain loaded. Now, to be fair, this was just our experience, all right? So, I have to be really open about that, but I did test this constantly for quite some time, and we had a period of 3 full days of solid testing. So I feel about ASPEQT like my high school teacher felt about me. He wrote, "Andrew has lots of potential if only he'd pay attention." I think ASPEQT is incredibly clever. It has extremely capable potential, but is currently burdened by some distractions, some bugs and issues. Last but not least, ASPEQT's not cheap. In Australia, it's about half the price of the Muse itself. So I don't really see the average user buying this, but maybe getting the dealer to provide it or do the calibration for the client, but it's still a big investment, even for the dealer. Okay, so the final wrap up. Is the Muse great? Yes. I think if you're a hobbyist, geek, guru, tinkerer, and you have time on your hands, you love to dabble, and you want to really fine-tune your room, you have an amazingly well set up acoustically balanced room, and you've got your subs sorted out and that sort of thing, then this is a truly great unit and you will love it. If you just want to buy a unit, hit a button and go, then perhaps this is a little above the capabilities of these users, at least until ASPEQT really truly hits its stride. I want to say this about the folks at Acurus, or more accurately at Indie Audio Labs. They were amazing. They talked to me all the time. They listened, they took on board our experiences. They didn't push back, and they pushed out firmwares to resolve this and for us to test. Finally, the cost of the unit. The Muse, at least in Australia, is about half the price of a Trinnov Altitude 16, but it's about the same price as a few other processors out there. There you go. We promised you a review of the Acurus Muse. I would highly recommend it if you are the sort of person who wants to get deeply involved in setting up your room. I think you'd be on a real winner. If you don't, well, then, there are plenty of other products out there. So I want to say a big thank you to Indie Audio Labs. I want to say a big thank you to Rick. And I'm excited for the future of especially this ASPEQT room calibration system. Thank you very much for listening. Please like, subscribe, and do comment below. We always look forward to your comments. And of course, we've got our Patreon channel up and running. If we can get a few Patreons on board, that will make a difference. What we'd like to do, of course, is this would then enable us to buy some product, which we can review, and then we can give that away to you people out there. And we will then also be able to help subsidize getting some extra staff in, which means they can do the work that I normally have to do, which means we can get these videos out there. So thank you very much. We do appreciate all of your support, all of your comments, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Bye for now.